Today on Doomed! It's a Vox Adpocalypse, everyone. A Vox Adpocalypse. Get into your bunkers. Be safe. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry, folks. This Vox Adpocalypse will be completely broken down and explained to you, and there will be no need to go into your bunkers or anything like that. It's a YouTube thing. Something we've discussed a lot on this show. You've probably seen this hashtag going around for the past 24 hours. We're going to break it down for you because joining me on this episode of Doomed with Matt Binder is independent, raw-footaged video journalist with news to share, Ford Fischer. Ford, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a very long day of trying to sort of get the word out from kind of every kind of outlet. I've done some podcast stuff. I talked to ABC. I spoke to Forbes. Their story hasn't come out yet. And Washington Examiner did a big piece about it. So it's been a lot of different type of media that's gotten into it. But I'm looking forward to getting into the beef of it here. Oh,
perfect. And we will get into the beef of it. And just, some of those outlets that have reached out to you and you've spoken to, it's just, this thing has really blown up in the past 24 hours. So before we go any further and get into, I guess your involvement, get into that meat that you just mentioned, let's, I guess, break it down for the people who have no clue. The words Vox Adpocalypse put together means as much to them as a Dr. Seuss nursery rhyme or some shit like that, basically. What is the Vox Adpocalypse?
Yeah, so basically there was a sort of dispute over the last week between two relatively prominent YouTubers, one at a relatively left-wing kind of news outlet, or he kind of does opinion news or analytic news with an agenda for Vox, and his name is Carlos Maza. And then there is Steven Crowder, who people would know as the voice of the brain on Arthur, but more recently they would know him as kind of a conservative commentator. He doesn't purport to be a journalist, and he's not, but a conservative sort of commentator / comedian, and one of the more popular, alongside kind of like Ben Shapiro types, one of the more popular conservative YouTubers on the platform. And basically Carlos had of late been doing some reporting on what he calls the hack gap. And this is a concept that where basically he alleges that there is supposed to be this kind of center journalist perspective, and that the left and the right, the Democrats, the Republicans, are supposed to sort of equally be trying to feed them information, and that the objective journalist is the one who is able to sift through the BS of both sides, and so on and so forth, which is a relatively well understood analysis. What he claims, his argument that many people disagree with, is that, and in good faith disagree with, and he can in good faith agree with, is that Fox News plays a unique role as something kind of in the middle of between the Republican Party and the media, and he refers to this as the hack gap, and he claims that there is no such equivalent for the left. This is a claim that I think people can very honestly be critical of, and I think that indeed it is the exact job of people who analyze and critique to look at ideas and counter them and such. Steven Crowder is not exactly a eloquent critiquer of philosophical and political issues. He is certainly somebody who uses a lot of profanity, I guess you could say. And Carlos basically was on the receiving end of a lot of kind of mocking and what he sees as bullying about his heritage and sexual orientation on the part of Steven Crowder. And he was pushing YouTube to basically remove him. He was saying a prominent YouTuber is bullying me, and so YouTube should enforce its community standards against him, was the talking point that Carlos would tend to use. Now, YouTube claimed that Crowder had not in any individual video actually violated the terms of service. They say, well, epithets based on certain characteristics are not necessarily bullying in and of themselves, if they're not provoking violence, if they're not inciting hate, that there are certain ways that YouTube considers there to be discretion. But YouTube, seemingly in response to this, but to be honest, I think it probably would have happened eventually anyhow, and I think they might have just rushed the rollout because of this controversy. YouTube basically broadened its community standards as far as what it considers to be bad. And in so doing, it said, as opposed to yesterday, as of today, Crowder no longer fits the definition of what we consider eligible for monetization. And in so doing, though, they sort of reported to the media and then followed through that they were going to remove and demonetize many other accounts that they felt no longer fit into what they consider to be acceptable content. So at the moment that purge happened, which was right after noon yesterday, I received 3 emails within 6 minutes of each other. 2 of the emails, all from YouTube. 2 of the emails detailed, or not detailed, but just told me that 2 specific videos of mine they considered to be unacceptable on their platform, and they deleted them.
So let's back up because there's a lot there.
Yes.
And I think and my audience certainly knows. And if you're just tuning in to the show for the first time, I'm going to let you know right now that I am a leftist commentator. I tackle things from the left, and sort of let's take things point by point, because I think what YouTube did to you flat out was wrong. And basically, like you said, just to back up and repeat, YouTube basically demonetized your channel for, what were the 2 videos that got deleted?
Yeah, so the 2 videos were, the first one was that I was at APAC, which is the American Israel Political Action Conference, the physical conference, not just the committee or whatever. And there was a pro-Palestine protest and there was a pro-Israel protest. And so the 2 are countering each other. And a Holocaust denier showed up. A guy shows up and starts saying, denying the Holocaust. And the other 2 sides, both the pro-Israel and the pro-Palestine people, are like, whoa, that's not good. And they both started arguing with him. These 2 sides that were kind of at each other's throats actually came together to argue with this dude. And so I had like a 12-minute video that was basically both of the sides coming together and questioning this dude and shutting him down. And so one of the new standards that YouTube has that apparently wasn't there before is that they now consider Holocaust denial to be a subject that's inappropriate on YouTube. And while I'm not somebody who's advocating censorship of anything in particular, I think that the important distinction to make, obviously, is that content that demonstrates for news purposes, for the purpose of analysis, let's watch how these people debated with this guy, is different from content that in and of itself denies the Holocaust. If somebody writes, if somebody makes a YouTube video where they are talking into the camera and themselves saying the hateful content or the history denying content or whatever, that is an entirely different thing than me coming across people confronting an activist over those subjects.
Right.
The other situation, the other video, was that there was a situation a couple months before Charlottesville happened. Okay, so Charlottesville was August 2017. And in June 2017, there was a rally in front of the Lincoln Memorial that mostly has been forgotten by history. But when I talk to documentarians about it, I bring it up very often because I believe that it was essentially the informal prequel to Charlottesville. I think Charlottesville happened more or less because of this rally, or it was the natural consequence of this rally. There was a rally held in Washington, D.C., and almost no violence, or basically no violence occurred because of the police being basically competent and separating the 2 sides, but the right wing gave their speeches. And I filmed those speeches knowing, history is going to need to understand how this insanity of violence, right, that would, it happened 2 months later, but it's happened since then. How did we get into this political moment? And so I recorded all of those speeches, and of the more popular people, the people who I think are more well-known and worth kind of tracking and hearing their words for investigative purposes, for analytic purposes, I posted those speeches. One of them was by a guy named Mike Enoch, and that was the particular one that was taken down. But the thing that I want to point out about all of that day all of that situation. That particular footage of Mike Enoch was used in a documentary on PBS that I associate produced about Charlottesville, and the premiere of that was actually presented by Martin Luther King III, right at our premiere.
Right.
So clearly, obviously, nobody would dispute that this documentary had news value, and that the way that I am able to get footage into these documentaries is basically via this YouTube, right? I show people this is the stuff that I have available, and that's how I'm able to sort of sell them the rights to master files and work with them via this YouTube. And many other speeches from that day have been used in many other important films. For example, Mike Enoch actually presented Richard Spencer. So the speaker who came directly after him at the end, he goes, "And here's Richard." Right. And then Richard Spencer started speaking. And that Richard Spencer speech, part of that footage was used in a film called White Right Meeting the Enemy, which actually won an Emmy Award. So when YouTube is taking this stuff down, they need to realize that this is for the purpose of critical analysis. And it is obviously for the purpose of meaningful documentary, as demonstrated by the fact that the stuff that has come straight out of that YouTube channel has literally won or been part of projects that have won Academy Awards, Emmys, and a Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism. That's a mouthful.
No, but it's well deserved from your work. And, I want to go back, like I said before, I want to go back and sort of unpack it all, because I actually think that the whole idea, it's being called the Vox Adpocalypse, but I actually think that name is completely wrong. And, we're here to talk about the whole situation and the Crowder Carlos, issue at hand certainly is really the crux of it here in terms of the whole thing. But what happened to you, truly, in my opinion, from everything I've seen, everything I've read, everything I've dug into, the accounts that were removed or demonetized, including yours, have nothing to do really with Vox Media or that feud. I think the whole idea. The whole idea that this was called, and I saw you retweet things where you said, or I'm sorry, I saw you tweet things where you don't think Carlos is responsible at all for any of this, and obviously so. But the Vox Adpocalypse name, the hashtag, I don't see the connection, because what happened was, it just so happened that on that day, where YouTube announced those policy changes, where they posted early that day on the YouTube blog, "Our ongoing work to tackle hate" was the title of this blog post, announcing this update where they were going to be broadening basically what constitutes white supremacy content, hateful content, things that were previously on the borderline according to YouTube. And they're saying now that certain things that fall into those categories that were on the borderline are no longer on the borderline. They are now not appropriate for the YouTube platform. And just so happened that same day, they also came out and announced to Carlos of Vox, Gay Wonk on Twitter, that, listen, we looked at Steven Crowder's YouTube channel and we decided that what's going on there isn't breaking with the policies. Now, the idea that those two things would in any way, shape, or form be the same just doesn't seem right to me. And I personally think it was framed that way by conservatives to try to connect the dots where there weren't any. Because what happened, like, for example, Carlos's one problem here was that Steven Crowder has been harassing him for being a gay man, for being a Latino man, nonstop, in addition to criticizing his videos, which is fine. The criticizing of the videos, his Vox videos, is fine. But his problem was the harassment that came from these names, these words being used, that basically also gave a sort of I don't know how to put this, sort of allowed Steven Crowder's audience the ability to go ahead and say, hey, this is cool to do, let me go and do this stuff to Carlos as well. I don't see the connection.
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, I think that generally speaking, this has been the direction that YouTube has been going overall. I think that what Vox probably caused, I might say, and I don't even like saying that Vox caused it. YouTube did it. right? I mean, at the end of the day, YouTube did the stuff, right? But what Vox might have caused is that this was a catalyst to push a fast rollout. YouTube claims that it carefully looked through my content. It used the word carefully in the email. That's just obviously not true. Their new policy that they posted the blog thing about does specifically say that they understand that content meant for analysis and criticism is supposed to stay there. And if they had done any, even the most rudimentary level of research about who I am, they would see an IMDb that shows that my footage from that very YouTube channel has been used in dozens of documentary films and is used on the mainstream media all the time. And indeed, by the way, I like to point out the irony of the fact that Vox itself has cited my work, right?
Right.
So I would not consider myself to be an enemy of Vox in general, nor would I consider myself to be in the same ring as someone like Crowder. Now, one thing that's interesting is that the right wing likes to talk about anti-censorship a lot, and I think it's nice to see them come around to that point of view, given that just historically that hasn't been the case.
Right.
The left may have, in some cases, advocates for censorship, and there's sort of a new, wave of the way that it goes. But historically speaking, the left wing generally has been against the big corporations and in favor of free speech. When you think of like my sort of free speech hero is Mario Savio, who was an activist from Berkeley, right? And so he was followed around by the FBI until the day he died because they suspected him of being a communist, right? Because he did free speech demonstrations and spoke out against the war machine, really. And so I guess the thing that I want to emphasize is that the right wing shouldn't own the issue of anti-censorship, and it's a problem that I see right now. I will talk to basically anybody who wants to ask me about these subjects. I am not secretive about the fact that, for example, Breitbart wanted to hear what I thought of all of this, and I replied to them. Right? I gave them answers, but I would just as happily come onto this program because I really don't think that fighting censorship of media should be a issue that is held by either side. And people should, in fact, be happy when someone on the other side comes to theirs. One thing I point out to the right wing a lot, and I don't know whether your viewers or you would consider yourselves pro-gun, but as an example, one thing that I point out to the right wing a lot is if you actually want to win on the gun issue, ally with the leftists who agree with you. There's a large pro-gun left in this country, and there's a quiet pro-gun center left in this country. And the reason that the right hasn't made much progress on that issue is because nobody thinks that the NRA is an appropriate place for progressives. And so they've turned it into a right-wing issue. I think fighting censorship really is a democratic issue, not a Democratic Party issue, a democratic issue in the kind of society that America is supposed to be about. But particularly as it relates to journalism and critical analysis, I think it's sort of especially important.
Right. I have to disagree with you there about a lot of points I agree with you, but I have to disagree with you about the whole idea that the right is coming around to this idea of anti-censorship or being free speech. Mm-hmm. Because what I see actually is they use it. I mean, this example, we're talking about this, and I framed it as we're talking about the Vox Adpocalypse because that's how it's become known. But
sure.
Again, this is them weaponizing something in their favor, whereas, if this was something else happening to another group, they really wouldn't care. And I think no example is greater than Ted Cruz out there tweeting, "This is nuts. YouTube needs to explain why Steven Crowder is banned," which A, is completely wrong. He is not banned from YouTube. He's been demonetized.
Sure.
And he continues, but Samantha Bee can call Ivanka a feckless C-word. Jim Carrey can say, "Look at my pretty picture of a governor, a Republican governor being murdered in the womb." I'm assuming Jim Carrey painted a picture against these anti-abortion crusaders. No coherent standard explains it, says Ted Cruz. And to me, there's so much there to actually talk about. The idea that he thinks that Carlos from Vox saying, I don't like these homophobic words being used against me all the time, which then riles up Steven Crowder's fan base to dox me and harass me. I don't think that's the same as Samantha Bee using the C word to describe the most powerful man in the world's daughter, who is also part of the administration and is also a very powerful figure. I don't think it's the same as Jim Carrey doing a, excuse me, a comedic portrait or painting of a very powerful Republican governor who is signing laws to marginalize women's rights and take away their right to control their own bodies. I don't think it's at all the equivalent, yet here's just another example of them using this idea that they care about free speech to really just push their own agenda. I really truly think that whenever you see them stand up for free speech, what they are standing up for is, hey, we want to be able to harass and demonize these minority groups that we attack via the internet, or worse, via law. And we want to be able to do that stuff without any sort of ramifications, even if it's, for example, against a very specific policy policy that these platforms lay out.
So there's a lot there. I would first start by there's one example that I use a lot, which is that Matthew Heimbach. Are you familiar with that name?
Yes.
To people who don't know, Matthew Heimbach is probably considered one of the more prominent neo-Nazis, or maybe he was until a little while ago, but one of the more prominent neo-Nazis,
he's the guy,
sort of of our generation.
Right. And for people who listen to the show, they know him as, I think, if I'm getting this right, there was a lot of family tree stuff going on.
Yes, it's a very complicated web.
Yes, he's the guy who screwed his cousin's wife or something like that.
No.
Even worse, right?
I've got this. Okay, Matt Heimbach, his stepfather. Okay, his stepfather married a new woman, and him and the stepfather co-founded the Traditionalist Workers' Party, which is a neo-Nazi group, together. And Matthew had relations with his stepfather's wife. And that was the day that people called the Night of Wrong Wives. So
it's a tangled web they weave there, you know?
So in any event, that actually wasn't what I was going to bring up, though. There was a moment, but I'm glad that we just sort of went through that just to set the scene. But long before that happened, there was a situation. It wasn't too long after Charlottesville. I think it was October, so 2 months later. There was this protest in front of the White House that Matthew Heimbach and Richard Spencer and many of the other kind of cast of characters from Charlottesville participated in, and the police protected them from Antifa very competently. It would have absolutely been a bloodbath if these two groups could have gone at each other, and there was essentially no violence because of the police. And so, sort of yelling through a police line, I asked Matthew, what do you think of the police and how they and how they've acted here, right? Because he had claimed that Charlottesville only became violent because of the police a couple months earlier. Okay, now the police are super heavy-handedly protecting you. What do you think of that? And he said, something to the effect of, we're glad to see that the police are standing up for our constitutional right and da-da-da-da-da, kind of what you'd expect. But he's a Nazi, right?
Right.
I mean, and I'm not saying that pejoratively. I know people like to say to me, oh, you're calling everyone a Nazi. No, Matthew Heimbach is literally a National Socialist. This isn't a pejorative. That's what he is.
Right.
He said in response... He said in response that stuff, and what I asked was, do you support that Constitution? And he said, the American Constitution? And I said, yeah. And the exact words that came out of his mouth were, we use it when it's convenient. And so I don't think that that's representative of everybody who you could broadly consider the right. There is a world of difference between conservatives and National Socialists. Those are completely different ideologies entirely. So I realize that when we talk about a Ted Cruz, there's almost no comparison to someone on the alt-right. With that being said, it is
Well,
still,
the lines are blurring a little bit nowadays, but I get what you're saying.
so some people on the right are free speech absolutists, and some people on the right think of it, generally speaking, as an expendable tool. And I would say that that's probably also true to some extent from people on the left. I have a friend, and I will call him a friend, but I have a friend who very frequently trolls my stuff, who is what is often referred to as a tanky. He is an authoritarian communist. He's a leftist who believes in a communist state, not Antifa, not an anarchist communist. This is someone who is fond of the DPRK and Stalin, etc. And this individual has joked about how he would kill liberals, right, in his sort of fantasy communism world. And so I'm using him as an intentionally extreme but accurate, this is a real person, example to point out that it is, to some extent, free speech is not something that is owned by the left or right, because the authoritarian side of either of those ideologies is perfectly capable of saying we don't support free speech when it's this or that. I think tech is a very unique and different situation, because sort of in a weird twist of ideology, it is kind of conservatives who have been saying we want to use government regulation to go after a corporation for doing what we see as social harm, which is usually the position of Democrats, who in this case tend to actually be pronouncing themselves in favor of the kind of laissez-faire capitalist approach to big tech censorship, which is let the corporations deal with it.
Well, I got to push back a little bit there too.
Sure.
There's definitely the corporate wing of the Democrats who, just look at where so many of Obama's 2008 campaign staff ended up. But the reason one of the main people who brought the issue to the forefront, who has an actual policy proposal, which no conservative, in my opinion, from what I've seen, has. The reason we're talking about breaking up all the big tech companies nowadays is because Elizabeth Warren put out a very detailed proposal. And I believe every single, I think maybe Cory Booker might be the only major candidate who came out against it, but every other major 2020 Democratic primary candidate has backed the idea of breaking up the major tech companies, and I haven't seen that from any conservatives. I haven't.
So to be honest, I haven't been super well studied on this, but my understanding of her reasoning is mostly economic. My understanding is that mostly it deals with the fact that, for example, Amazon has a near monopoly on the shipment of electronics, but they're also establishing, for example, the streaming websites, as well as the like the production of like cords and stuff, right? Like I'm using an Apple headphone, but it might be actually an Amazon Apple headphone, right? And so Amazon's kind of production of those things, and that I believe that what she has talked about breaking up like big tech is mostly in reference to trying to force competition in order to what she sees as raise wages and remove monopoly power and so on from those corporations. I could be wrong, and please tell me if you've actually seen something to the contrary, but I don't think I've seen her talk about that in reference to we're doing that to protect free speech online.
Right, but I don't even think she has to say that, or any Democrat has to say that. That is the issue, isn't it? The fact that Facebook is a monopoly, YouTube is a monopoly. There are no, there was a time where there were social networks and competing live streaming services, and there was Ustream, Justin TV, YouTube, probably a dozen other smaller ones I can't even think of. There was a time when there was a Friendster, a MySpace, a Facebook, and all these things, all these different sites were, and there were niche websites, niche social networks for specific types of hobbies or things people were into, and pretty much that's all gone now because Facebook, YouTube, Amazon, Google, I should say, instead of YouTube, own so much of everything that there's no space for anyone to come up. And that way, when someone gets banned from Facebook, when someone gets banned from YouTube, that's why it's such a big issue, because there's nowhere else for them to go. Like, to me, that's the conversation that these free speech rights people, if they actually cared about free speech, should be talking about, because that's the reason why we're in this. If you ask me, that's why this is such a big issue. Facebook, as a private company, has every right to say we don't want this sort of content on our site. Do I agree with it? No, it sucks, but that's in their right. There's nothing that can force them to do that. If they weren't so powerful, if they weren't such a monopoly, if it wasn't, you're not on Facebook, you don't exist, you're not on YouTube, you don't exist, then that wouldn't be, when Facebook bans you, you go, oh, no big deal. I got my audience on this other social network. YouTube bans you. I got another audience on this live streaming or video platform. That just isn't the case.
Mm-hmm. I found this. So generally speaking, her breaking up the thing is based on what I sort of described. But I did find an interaction. The one interaction that goes to this. There was a situation where, and I'm reading this off of on like the internet. I didn't know this until like a minute ago, or I might have seen it, but for whatever. Elizabeth Warren wrote about the fact that she actually had some posts that were taken down on Facebook, which again highlights for me the fact that this is not a left-right issue, right? Elizabeth Warren is not precisely far-right. But so she had some posts that were taken down. I think that they were ad posts, and I think what was in question was whether they were valid political genuine political postings as opposed to, Russian propaganda kind of stuff.
Right.
But Facebook realized that they were fine and restored Elizabeth Warren's stuff. And she posted about it and did use the hashtag #BreakUpBigTech. Ted Cruz did retweet it. He writes, "First time I've ever retweeted Elizabeth Warren, but she's right. Big tech has way too much power to silence free speech. They shouldn't be censoring Warren or anybody else, a serious threat to our democracy." I haven't really seen much else come out of that. And to be honest, when I've seen politicians, I'm going to close those tabs. I don't even really care what Elizabeth Warren and Ted Cruz have to say so much. But when I've seen most politicians talk about this subject, I really find it to be kind of paying lip service to energize certain bases that are interested in hearing about it without a whole lot of tangible outcomes. So, like, for example, like Trump has kind of talked about this. But then he has this like page that you can report tech censorship to the White House. And my understanding is that or my impression, I guess, based on other people's analysis, is that it's really not going anywhere. It's just turning you into an email list person.
Right. We actually, the previous episode of this show, for anyone who's hasn't tuning in for the first time today, the last episode of this show had a guest on who hosts interestingly enough, a podcast about censorship, and we went through that White House social media reporting tool, and it is literally just a tool for them to build their email list. There's nothing else behind it. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. But for me, this is how I look at it, and this is just from what I see. There's no really denying the fact that. Here's an example, and I don't expect you to know this because it's so random, and I know not everybody saw this. It was a very specific thing. The House, a committee in the House 2 weeks ago had a hearing on facial recognition technology, and Democrats and Republicans on this House committee were in agreement that this was a real problem, and it was good to see. However, when this became an issue to talk about, the Democrats on the committee would speak about how this is bad because I'm looking at the science, and what we're seeing here is this facial recognition technology is wrongly identifying something like a much larger percentage of people of color than anyone else. So this is a clear problem because this is what the science says. And then I very particularly remember Jim Jordan, a Republican in the House. He constantly would bring up how this facial recognition technology is a problem in government hands because we see that the IRS, if you remember when this was an issue, has gone after right-wing organizations, which was a controversial issue that turned out not to be 100% accurate, to say the least. That was sort of used as a conservative rallying call to sort of rally up their base and make it seem like the Obama administration was doing something nefarious specifically to conservative groups. And, to me, that just speaks so much to, and I know we're going a little bit off here, but I do think this is a part of it, because I don't want people to get confused, because even as I saw you talk about it online, no matter how much you yourself, because you're aware of it, I know you are, we're talking right now about it.
For sure.
As much as you kept saying to people, no, Carlos of Vox, gay wonk on Twitter, is not responsible for this. He was bringing up legitimate points, and in fact, he's defended me. it seems to just be going in one ear and out the other. And I think for a lot of people, and who care about this issue, because I think if you care about this issue as posed as Vox Adpocalypse, I think you already are misunderstanding it. Truthfully, I think that's what it comes down to. And I titled this episode very specifically to reach those type of people, hopefully, because otherwise, if I didn't put Vox Adpocalypse in the title, it would not have gotten the SEO or any other random necessary tech stuff to get this in front of those people.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I pointed out about Carlos and kind of everybody else is that in my view, at the end of the day, YouTube will always be responding to hundreds of people saying take down this or that. When I post a video that shows a right-winger committing an act of violence, that right-winger may well want it taken down. The same is true of the left wing. The same is true of when I platform the left, the right might not be happy, right, in their view if it's platforming. If I film the right, the left might not be happy because they view it as platforming, whatever. People will always report content based on what they don't like. In Carlos's case, I don't think it was so much political as you pointed out, and as I think we all kind of know. What he was more upset about was the way he was being talked about as a person, not so much the fact that he was being called out on the content of the videos he was making.
Right.
But at the end of the day, whether he calls for this or, whatever YouTube does is YouTube's decision. And so people can do public advocacy. Like, frankly, I'm here largely because I'm trying to build awareness for the fact that that what was done to me is wrong, right? People can build public awareness. And at the end of the day, whether YouTube fixes it for me or not is a function of them, not me. And in the same way, them screwing this up is a function of them and not Carlos. And to that end, I'd note, Carlos was not happy with the rollout that they had. He said that what happened to me is effing terrible. His words. So what happened to Fort Fisher is effing terrible. And he said it's ridiculous basically that YouTube doesn't understand the difference between good faith reporting on white supremacy and white supremacist content itself. So he is on my side of this, I guess you could say. And interestingly, so is Steven Crowder. Even Crowder has said this is ridiculous, and I'm not someone who would color myself as politically or stylistically in tune with what Crowder is kind of all about.
Right. Listen, if I was in your shoes, I would definitely welcome all the people who are coming out. But again, I think that the reason certain people are coming out for you who are on the right, I think it helps when YouTube. The best possible thing that could happen to people like Steven Crowder was for this to happen to you, to be completely honest to you. Because it allows them to paint this as, see, it's not something that I did. It's, I got to stand up for this guy because it'll help show people that YouTube is after everyone because of Vox. I honestly, and again, this is completely out of your hands. Nothing you could have done about this. Mm. But that's what I think is the reason why these someone like a Crowder is coming out so strongly for you, because I just heard today, and I don't have the clip on me, but Joe Rogan, and I don't expect you to have seen this, but Joe Rogan...
No, I don't watch him a whole lot.
But Joe Rogan had David Pakman on the show yesterday. And Joe Rogan they started talking about the Vox Adpocalypse. And Joe Rogan brings up, listen, I don't see a difference, and I'm not sure if you're even familiar with any of the people I'm about to bring up. Or the scenarios I'm about to bring up. But Joe Rogan says, listen, I don't see a difference between Crowder's audience going after Carlos saying debate Steven Crowder and Sam Cedar, the Majority Report's audience, tweeting at Dave Rubin, debate Sam Cedar. And he tried to make this false equivalency as if that was the issue. And again, that's what's going on here. To me, it's as clear as day with the right, is they're trying to portray that, what we did wasn't wrong. But again, if you just, I guarantee you this would not have happened. And again, I'm not saying to you specifically, to the broader audience. If Carlos just got the texts, well, the texts are probably a problem because it doxed him. If Carlos just got tweets saying debate Steve Crowder over and over again, he would have just brushed it off his shoulder, no big deal. It's the specific homophobic attacks that warranted, that grew out of this harassment. And it's just something that I think they're using to sort of deflect from the real issue. And that's my analysis of this all. And before we go any more into that, I think we've covered that thing. But let's talk about your demonetization, because I think that's something we should definitely touch upon a bit more, being that you're here. The problem there, in my opinion, is that YouTube rolls out these rules, and there's automated systems who can't tell the difference between someone saying something really that's harassment or someone saying something that's tongue-in-cheek. We don't have the AI technology. It's not there yet for them to be able to tell something like that. So in many ways, it's also what's happened to your videos. You're legitimately covering something. A Holocaust denier walks by and starts spewing his hatred, and you're covering that because it's part of the event. And the automated systems do not have the ability to say, hey, this is not someone vlogging in their bedroom advocating for the fact that the Holocaust didn't happen. It's a guy who's covering an event and is covering this because it's newsworthy that this guy was at this event spewing this bullshit. And I think that's something that never really comes up. They automatically think that YouTube is nefariously running around going like, I'm going to listen to NBC and go after everyone who is right-wing. Listen, that's just not what's happening.
Yeah, so there was a whole lot to unpack there. There was a lot of different stuff. I think the main point you were trying to get at was sort of false equivalencies. I think that's just a theme that I would point out, which is that when they do all of this in one big foul swoop, and they do the exact same action to Steven Crowder's channel and to my channel, and then news outlets write about those two things in the same story, yes, people paint me and him as some kind of allies. And in fact, I answered questions to an outlet called The Libertarian Republic that asked me about the censorship issue, and I would say they're basically supportive of don't censor, and that's nice. But they posted their story, and the featured image, apparently they reached out to Crowder also, and their headline said something like Steven Crowder or Crowder and Fischer speak out about YouTube, right. And it was this picture of I've never met Crowder in my life. I've never talked to him. I think apparently he's now been mentioning me on his broadcasts because of kind of what you're talking about here. But I've never met with him in my life. But it's this Photoshop picture of us next to each other. And I realized that the picture's not trying to claim as if him and I were physically there next to each other. It's a very obviously Photoshopped image. But I think it does falsely kind of make this pretense of the two of them together. And if you actually think that the people that some of these people deserve censorship and some of them don't, when you censor them all together, you are providing cover to the people who you believe do deserve it, right? When Crowder is hit and I am hit, and literally a history teacher, an actual school teacher who has a YouTube channel that he uses to teach about history, and it had some Hitler stuff on it because it's literally just raw video of Hitler speeches that he's using to teach classes on history, right? When all of those things go down at the same time, Crowder gets to say, I got censored just like the news media and a school teacher. Right. And so if YouTube really wants to have legitimacy when it does this stuff, it needs to actually be careful because YouTube lost a lot of legitimacy by doing this, and it draws into question, I think, for a lot of people, the act of censorship overall. It gives cover where now a Ted Cruz, I don't think Ted Cruz has said anything about my case specifically, but people who we interact with does. Ben Shapiro mentioned me by name on his show today, right? When those people start talking about it kind of in the same breath, it will rightly or wrongly get it into people's heads that censorship is inherently and has to be a slippery slope, right? That's what people say, and YouTube is proving it true, whether it's true or not.
Right. YouTube is 100% at fault here for just the they came out with so many different statements, like they were changing with the blow of the wind. It was
a mess.
It
Absolutely.
was ridiculous that a company like YouTube was doing this. It was, and let's just get back to what you said about the conflation of you with Steven Crowder. The idea that Steven Crowder is some sort of victim is absurd to me, because I am guaranteeing you right now that the fact that Steven Crowder is one of, if not the most prominent conservative voice on YouTube with his over 3 million subscribers, I will guarantee you that that's the reason why YouTube did not come down hard on him. If the roles were reversed and your channel, News2Share, with how many subscribers do you have on YouTube, Buck? A couple tens of thousands?
27,500 or something like that.
If you had done the thing Steve Crowder did to Carlos with the consistently dragging him with homophobic words and harassment, you would not be sitting here saying you were demonetized. The
channel would be gone.
Yeah, you would be gone. They wouldn't. I
agree.
Totally. And on top of that, not only you'd be sitting here saying, like Crowder is saying, I'm demonetized until I remove a T-shirt. That's what they're giving him. You're demonetized until you remove the link to the T-shirt you have for sale. Not even, we don't want, I mean, they can't really tell him not to sell it, I guess. They could just say, don't put it on our platform. Fine, that's as far as they can go. But the idea that he is somehow in the same boat as you, you're being unfairly swept up in a broad YouTube rule change that has nothing to do with the Steven Crowder issue to begin with. And then number two, you would be talking to me about a deleted channel. No doubt in my mind.
I basically agree. Yeah, I mean, I think that YouTube has clearly had a very difficult time with this, because I don't think that they want to lose people who are watching this content by the hundreds of thousands. They don't want to lose that money. And at the same time, they want to look like they're actually doing something about what somebody has said and gotten a lot of attention for saying is bullying, right? So they are in between a rock and a hard place, I think, because ultimately their bottom line is money. YouTube is not ideologically about the concept of free speech. I don't think they really particularly care about the fact that content off of my YouTube channel has been used in Emmy and Academy Award-winning films. I think they care about dollars. Right.
Absolutely.
And so Steven Crowder makes them a lot of money, and they can't pretend that he doesn't. They also might lose quite a bit of money if in PR people stop supporting YouTube generally, if advertisers pull whatever because of what Vox is saying. So they are trying to tread on this line. And clearly they've had great difficulty with it because people have been extraordinarily critical of them today. And so they keep clarifying and re-clarifying. At first they clarified, and I wrote, what the F, YouTube, when they said, yes, well, if Steven removes the offending T-shirt, then he'll be reinstated. Really? All of this over? I'm dealing with this because of a T-shirt, right? And then people said, well, that's not like the problem. The problem is not a T-shirt. With an epithet on it, right?
Yeah, I just got to bring up the T-shirt because for people who are listening and have no idea what we're talking about, I know that's not.
Yeah, you can explain.
But yeah, so basically, Steven Crowder sells a Che Guevara T-shirt that the cliche shirt that it became very mainstream. Hipsters wear it in jokes where people say, "Oh, look, it's the hipster shirt," whatever. So he made that T-shirt with the Che face on it, and it says socialism is for F, and then there's an image of a fig leaf from a fig tree, GS, and basically it's supposed to say socialism is for the F word used to, the derogatory term for gay people. And,
and it's ridiculous because he goes, it just says socialism is for figs.
Right. And we all know why because what does socialism is for figs even mean? It means nothing. And the Che face is next to a limp wrist. And what is that limp wrist? Is that how you pick figs off a fig tree? Like, give me a break.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Yeah. I actually haven't seen the shirt. I've just seen it described like in text.
There's it's the Che face, and then literally there's like his arm coming up next to him, and it's a limp wrist.
I'm rolling my eyes like so hard. I just like, okay, let me just like point out, and I'm guessing you and your audience are not going to like this, but let me just say, it's especially stupid, like the words that he's saying, because like Che hated gay people, right? Like historically, the authoritarian left has killed all of the gays that they possibly can. So the idea of putting making an equivalence between Che Guevara and homosexuality is ridiculous. He literally said, you can't make a revolution with homosexuals are not capable of making a revolution. Totally terrible, offensive, weird thing to say. And in the context of American politics, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it makes the T-shirt even more ridiculous, where even if you follow like, there's literally no way that you can like analyze this thing to make it be funny or smart.
Someone on Twitter just pointed out to me that the shirt actually existed before Crowder started selling it without the fig leaf logo, like the fig leaf in where the where the A is supposed to be. So I mean,
did it have an A? It literally just said those words.
It was probably, I guess, either it was like that, or I guess like an asterisk where the A is. I have no idea.
See, but it's like Westboro Baptist
right.
church kind of stuff. It's just like so, like it's just sort of like ridiculous. I don't know. It doesn't. I don't need. I'm preaching to the choir.
Right.
But
right. No, I'm. Let's actually talk about what you're worried about for the future, I guess, in terms of. Because I heard you bring it up in another interview that some of YouTube's new policies could affect how people cover events in the future, and I think that's true in some cases, and I think in other cases I'm not so worried. But let me hear from you what you're worried about as someone who covers events of all sorts.
I'm going to use I have two real world examples that are in the next 2 days. So these are not hypotheticals. These are things that will happen tomorrow and the following day. Tomorrow night, I kind of had what was supposed to be 2 days off. Today and yesterday, I was supposed to be doing nothing, and I ended up with this ridiculous onslaught of this issue where I've gotten involved in this crazy, ridiculous thing. But tomorrow, I am covering at 5 p.m. an event called the Dyke March. It is a pro-LGBT pride event that takes place annually in a lot of cities, but DC is a pretty big one. And specifically, it is focusing on pride for lesbian women. Okay, lesbian pride, definitely not something YouTube would take issue to. Maybe they'd have issue with nudity, but honestly, as far as me posting it onto YouTube, I can mostly edit around. I can chop around nudity. I could blur out boobs or whatever. That's not really the issue.
The funny thing about that, again, this is not the main point, but just to interject it. The funny thing about that is that LGBT creators on YouTube have actually said just the content of what they're talking about has got them demonetized before, which is incredible.
I don't doubt that at all.
Right. So I'm talking not even like nudity or anything like that. Just like, something that if it was a straight male was talking about in the same context about, they would be fine with it and would not have gotten them demonetized. But going back to what you said, I just wanted to throw that in there that, again, shockingly, conservatives are not the most marginalized group on YouTube.
Yeah. So and it's kind of been pointed out that so I studied. I'll carry your side note a little bit further, which is to say I studied film. I actually didn't study journalism in college. I was a film major, and
that
one
was
of the
same
issues,
as just. Sorry for interrupting you again, but same as me.
Cool. Yes. Awesome. I had a class on censorship, but it was kind of in the context of both fiction, film, and news. And one of the things that we sort of talked about in that is actually MPAA ratings for movies tend to be stricter on sexual content as it pertains to non-straight sex, or even sex in positions that are considered outside of the norm. So I'll kind of leave that comment on its own. But I mean, whether it's YouTube or the MPAA, generally speaking, sexuality tends to be kind of marginalized, especially when it's itself a gender or sexual minority. So with that being said, and it again highlights the fact that censorship is, affects kind of all people. A real concern that I have tomorrow, and I don't say this facetiously, I don't say this sarcastically or hypothetically. A real concern I have about the very thing I'm covering tomorrow is YouTube, with its new kind of broad explanation of what the problem is, and with its clear non-understanding of what news content is. They say that one of the things that they have a problem with is people making derogatory comments towards protected groups, and they have a list of them. It's veteran status, religious status, gender, sexuality, minority, race, kind of all the things that you would expect. So one of them is sexuality, right? And one of their standards, it seems a little bit difficult, but one of their standards is basically a claim of superiority or inferiority, right? A comment of I believe that this sexuality is better than that sexuality, theoretically could be banned by YouTube. Tomorrow I will cover the Dyke March. It will be about lesbian pride. I'm not worried about that, and I'm not worried about YouTube taking down something over lesbian supremacy or something. But a real concern that I have is if somebody on the street, let's say MAGA guy, some MAGA dad tourist, he's wearing a Trump cap and he sees this march, he had no idea it was coming, and he yells at them and makes some kind of comment that they are of an abomination before God, or that they are inferior before God, right? Or they're inferior because the Bible says so. Any kind of comment like that. Does YouTube expect me to not include the fact that that happened because that is literally it is showing a guy making a comment of superiority against a protected group. If that guy were to scream into his computer saying that stuff, YouTube would ban him. And that's pretty obviously the stated purpose of this stuff. But if I film that guy saying that homophobic slur at those people, is my content liable to be called hate content because I'm covering that guy? This isn't an abstraction. That will probably happen, more or less. And the question that I have to deal with, because I always include that stuff, right? Somebody yelled at them, right? I was at an march for impeachment on Saturday, 5 days ago, and Trump people showed up and yelled at the impeachment people, and I included that in the video. Here's those people debating. Here's how they disrupted. Here's how the other side reacted. Whatever. In this case, should I, as a content creator, feel obligated to sanitize the condition of these people? If I made the decision, as some content creators would, and I don't know if I'm supposed to. I sort of refuse to self-censor on principle, but I think there are many content creators in my situation who would say, I'm not going to risk it. And what the result of that is if I would normally film the Dyke March and include the fact that people yelled at them and harassed them, and if I was going to disinclude that, then now to the viewer, they are seeing an incomplete telling of that story where they believe that nobody opposed them. YouTube is literally causing the sanitization of the exact issues that they are doing. It is the denial of the exact kind of oppression that they claim to be fighting against. I think it is admirable and comes from a good place that they, for example, want to say we shouldn't have Holocaust denying content. They are literally saying, though, we don't want you to talk about the people who are currently oppressing people. Similarly, covering an anti-illegal immigration protest on Saturday that Stuart Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers, is going to be at in front of the White House. YouTube claims that immigration status, which I take to mean being an immigrant or being a legal versus illegal immigrant, is a protected status. You're not allowed to say derogatory things about immigrants. If I film Stuart Rhodes, who is a prominent and newsworthy person, his militias literally are detaining people at the border, right? This guy is. Many people would claim that this guy is is the leader of a paramilitary group that has a strange relationship with the state, and and in my opinion, it's very worth studying. So when that guy has I've never met him, I've never filmed him before. When that guy has something to say, I want to document it. How does he think of what he is doing? Does he believe that he is a paramilitary group? Does he believe that he's an extension of the state? Does he believe that he's operating with Donald Trump's endorsement? If I put out something of that and he mentions the illegals, right? And I'm using air quotes as I say that. Is YouTube going to take down my content studying that person? Is YouTube going to make it so that researchers who want to write about and do documentaries about and television about and whatever these situations, does YouTube want them not to be able to do that? Again, not abstractions. These are real examples of things that will happen in the next 2 days, and I don't know if YouTube's new standards will allow them or not. Right.
I think those are truly things to be worried about in terms of the content you're filming and what happens to it on YouTube. I don't know where YouTube's coming from with this. I don't know what they're... To me, the immigration status thing makes sense when Again, I don't agree with anything those guys say, but using your example where you're going to be covering this event, to me that seems like a legitimate thing to have on YouTube for people to watch and understand what's going on, so they could critique, criticize, talk about it, because it's an event that's happening. It should be covered. It's newsworthy. To me, the way to go after that sort of thing on the platform is, and I've seen this happen, and I hope this is what they're talking about, because to me this is truly the stuff that does not belong anywhere, is someone will hear a dreamer or something advocate for something online, and they'll attack them for being an undocumented immigrant, and not just attack them for being an undocumented immigrant, they'll CC ICE, they'll call immigration and tell them everything they know about the person, and actually try to get this person deported or ruin their life in some aspect. And to me, that seems like what should be the clear interpretation of those rules. That should be no sort of gray area. If you're doing that, to me, and that's to me what was going on with Carlos, what Steven Crowder was doing. It was going after someone very specific for being part of a certain group. And it wasn't just an offhanded comment. It wasn't just something that just happened once. It's something that's done in a harassing manner. And that, I think, is the type of stuff they should go after. And not sort of... And I do wonder sometimes whether they even mean to demonetize some of the stuff they do. Because, they probably do so much of it with their automated systems. And again, unless you're a Steven Crowder with 3 million plus subscribers, they're not going to jump to assess the situation and help you out, like in your case.
Yeah. Sorry, I had a response, then I just lost it. I completely lost my train of thought as we. No,
I think you were gonna. No, don't worry about it. I think you were gonna say something when I mentioned the going after a specific person for their immigration status and trying to get them deported or something like that.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So I've got it. What I was gonna mention is that yes, you should. It should be obvious that there's an obvious line. There's a difference. It's not a line. There's a football field between harassing somebody in the way that you just described and me filming somebody who talks about people with those same sort of themes. And in the same way, berating a particular YouTube user or a particular private individual over their sexuality, it should be a completely different thing than me filming a pro-LGBT march and seeing homophobes who show up at it and counter-protest them or heckle them or whatever. YouTube claims not to understand that difference, right? This is the critical thing. As obvious as that should be to anybody with a brain, how different those things are, YouTube claims, as of yesterday, not to understand the difference. By taking down my content, they claimed not to understand the difference between filming people confront a Holocaust denier and literal Holocaust denying content. They claim not to know the difference between white nationalist content and me filming a white nationalist for the purpose of critical analysis that was used in a documentary that MLK spoke at the premiere, MLK the third, right? Those purposes are football fields apart from each other, and YouTube has made a ridiculous conflation and a ridiculous mistake by acting like they are the same thing. And their rules are so overly broad, probably by design to give them discretion, but apparently discretion that they are abusing, to be honest. Those rules are so overly broad as to not make that distinction whatsoever.
Ford, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I just want to make sure we got your Twitter name. It's at Ford Fischer, Fischer, of News2Share. You want to plug your...
News the number 2 share, just so that you know. News TO share doesn't work. It's news the number 2 share.
Got it. And do you want to plug your channel or your website?
Yeah. So the website is news2share.com. It's news the number 2 share. Similarly, News2Share, all one word, on Facebook. On Twitter, there is at N2S Reports, and there's also at Ford Fischer. And I also have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/, Ford Fischer, and given that I can't make money directly on YouTube, essentially I'm going to still use YouTube because it's what people see. It gets viewership, and I want people to have access to this. What I really think that I've amassed quite a library, a directory that helps people understand the pre and during, and will understand the post-Trump era. Right? I kind of started doing this like 2014, and I think that I've kind of drawn. I covered the Black Lives Matter movements back in the day. Which still continues to some extent to now, but I think we know kind of 2014 to 2015 as like the beginning, the inception of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
And so I've covered kind of the trends in activism, good, bad, and ugly, since then to now, and plan to continue to. And I think that my channel is a valuable resource to understand this kind of wide political moment. And so I do continue to plan to continue to use it regardless of whether it becomes financially fruitless, and for that reason, I'd appreciate people's support on Patreon.
All right, Ford, thanks so much for joining us tonight. It was really, really great, and I hope they don't demonetize your channel. I hope they remonetize your channel, and I hope they restore the videos they removed, because it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I don't think I need to repeat what we talked about for the past hour.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your support in having me on.
Take care.
All right, thanks.
All right, everybody. Here comes the Skype sound. Doot doot. Love it. Let's go to the second half of the show. But first, actually, let me bring up the fabulous people who make this show possible on Patreon. Patreon.com/MattBinder. If you enjoy this show and what we do on this show, Patreon.com/MattBinder is where you should go and become a patron. I ask for $5 a month. You could give more. You could give a less. You could give a less. Will you hear me right now? You could give a less, but please, only give what you can. Not more. Unless you really want to. But, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Andrew H, Benji A, Bobby M, Brooke H, Champagne Kami, Chi, Christine H, Colin R, Dave K, David H Z, Dragon Slayer, Dum Da Dum Dum, Floaties, Fraz K, Francis Z, FTW All Day, Greg D, Ian Curtis J, Jameson Test, Janelle A, Jasmine H, Jeff K, Jonathan B, Joseph R, Katie S, Kyle, Lisa D, Max W, User Me, Michael J, Michael M, Mr. Danks, Nicole A, Namde Net, Omid M, Romina O, Ryan Left His Best, Struggle Session, TM, Tammy G, Thaddeus A, Tina M, Tom G, Tom M, Trina E, Will P, and Zaron. Those are the folks who make this show possible by being patrons. You can also support the show by going to iTunes or Google Play or anywhere you listen to podcasts and leave a iTunes. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Leave a review for the podcast. If it's on iTunes, leave 5 stars if you think it's worth 5 stars, and leave a written review telling people why you love this show so much. If you could also support this show, but what are the other ways to support this show? I can't even think. Subscribe on YouTube right here, right now. And if you only want to give a one-time off donation to this show, you can do it right now in the live stream super chat. You go onto YouTube, the live stream we're doing right now, if you're watching live, go to the chat and click that super chat button. Listen to me, I sound like I'm a Monster Jam commentary team or something like that. You guys want to know something funny? I got a big, beautiful, professional light to use using your Patreon money to upgrade the show. And it was working fine this week. I plug it in now and it's not working. That's the life I lead, folks. That's the life I lead. Gotta return it now, I guess. Unbelievable. Really. I honestly am really angry about it, actually. All right. Let's go to the members half of the show. And to everyone else, see you all next time on Doomed. We are back. We are back. That's what we are. We are back. What's up, everybody? Patron subscribers, the wonderful people who give me the funds to keep the show going, the wonderful people who brought the new pro level light I purchased thanks to your funding of the show that I now have to return because it stopped working literally right before this program. But that's okay. That's okay. I had pulled, to talk about this episode, I had pulled the Steven Crowder stuff that was said. But I don't know. I don't know if I should play it. I don't feel like playing it. Maybe it would have helped, but maybe it was not. I don't want it. Yeah, let's not play it. I don't need to. Fuck Steven Crowder. His whole debate me shtick. With Carlos from Vox. Just, you gotta do it to Dave Rubin, who actually won't debate anybody. Let's go to the comments. And I'm just so upset about this light, guys. So upset about this light. You should have seen it. It was beautiful. I could actually use the green screen with it because it was perfect. But alas. That's how the show rolls, right? Nothing works. All right. Let's go to the YouTube comments or Periscope comments or wherever you commented. Champagne Kame. Legion of Doom assemble. News2Share. Oh, looks like News2Share was in the chat while he was talking to us. Hey guys, Ford here. I look forward to talking with everyone. This was great. Cherry, does Matt do these live streams often? I've never seen one before. I do one every week, or as Ryan says, literally every week or almost every week. Right, I try to do it every week. I try to at least do 4 shows a month. I would really like to do more. And I was really happy that this light would enable me to do the... Because to me, honestly, I think for the live streams, I would use the light for live streams, but I think for live streams, the lighting doesn't really affect it as much because people who've been watching live streams over the years are familiar with live stream quality not being the best sometimes, even though obviously now it's gotten better. But I think, there is that leeway there. But for those standalone, produced, edited videos, those news hits I want to record, those commentary clips I want to record, I need the good lighting for it. And that was going to start. And now it's all put on pause. Because of this stupid freaking light. It wasn't cheap either, guys. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't like I bought some $10 light. Like a $200 light I bought. Unbelievable. Kennedy says, we're all excited to watch. Thank you, Kennedy. Brian, almost every show for the last few months. The early episodes were not, though, right? The first, I would say, slightly more than a dozen episodes were not live streamed. But this is like the 61st episode now of Doomed. So we're well beyond, the last few months. I think, actually, it's been a full year, if not a little bit more, of me doing the live stream. So you might have not even been aware of the beginnings of the live stream, Brian. Ryan says, I think he missed when he was becoming a dad again. But that's about it. Right, the kid barred me from doing the live stream for a week. I think it's actually 2 weeks because something happened with a guest. And, of course, the next week where I was going to make up for it, the kid was born. Kids and their timing, right? Ryan says, what I found most staggering about this entire Crowder thing is finding out just how much of a corny dipshit he is. Alex J on Periscope. Labor just took Peterborough, comrades. General election now. Mr. K sends me a song by the Melvins. We are doomed. I'm going to have to click this song and save it for later. Brian says he's somehow going to find a way to be even a bigger piece of shit than Sargon. Oxy says Matt Binder seems taller this episode. Do I? Grim says bullies don't like being bullied. Ali says Crowder Adpocalypse. Exactly. You know what? I'm going to rename this episode Vox Adpocalypse or Crowder Adpocalypse. I think that because I had to put the Vox Adpocalypse in the title. Otherwise, no one would have known exactly what we were talking about because that's unfortunately the conservatives won in naming the issue. Nothing wrong. I could give them that. I don't think it's the end of the issue though. They named the issue, but we're honestly debunking their framing of it, which I think we're winning on that front. Grim says down goes Crowder. KKK Crowder. Right. Oxy says he thinks he's a comedian. Right. Crowder equals a goofball, says Bullwhip. Entertainers as generous as I can be, says Grim. Yakima on Periscope. Thundercats. Ho! Right. Kennedy says he also uses homophobic slurs. Yes. Champagne Comedy says an objective journalist would realistically support left-wing policies. From my understanding, it seems like my guest tonight, Ford, who is great, is sort of like a Glenn Greenwald type libertarian, which Glenn Greenwald is honestly on the left side of many issues. I would say like 99% of issues. So Jay Driba says Crowder's a homophobic piece of shit. Brian says he sells merch with slurs. Oxy says bullying versus enforcing community guidelines equitably across channels. Tim says Crowder is such a fucking muppet, but really his biggest sin is that he's completely unfunny, right? Jay Driba says YouTube is garbage though. Kennedy says algorithms bad, censoring fascists good. Jay Juris says yes. Champagne Comedy says at least demonetize the fascists. Well, you guys know my opinion on it. Demonetization, yes. I actually am not for really removing people off of these platforms. I think I agree with our guest today, Ford, that this content out there is helpful in creating to use to create commentary and criticism that debunks a lot of this stuff. But when they are removed and they are deplatformed, I do also understand how it works, and I think in some cases is good, even though I don't advocate for it. And it's not the hill I'm going to die on to defend those people, because I'm not going to defend them. Some people aren't worth it. Some people get deplatformed, and it's she didn't broke the rules, buddy. I'm not going to stand up for you. That's the price you pay. There's consequences. Ryan says, wait, this is a leftist show? Unsubscribed. Ryan, how could you? Oxy says, he has problems with YouTube, yet he's using YouTube to critique YouTube. Very interesting. I'm very intelligent, you should also say, Oxy. Mr. K says, Press for Truth, David Dole, and many more have been demonetized. There's a solution for demonetization by YouTube. Add an Amazon affiliate link to your videos. Amazon Associates gives you a percentage of all sales after clicking on your links. Daniel says, so why won't a disclaimer about the content suffice? Alex on Periscope says, the creators must seize the tubes. Let me go back. About Daniel's question, why don't a disclaimer about the content suffice? I think that works, in my opinion, but I also understand how it doesn't. Here's the thing, though. A lot of these guys, actually, from my role in what I do, I'm able to get some off-the-record comments, which, as who I am, I'm not going to break that trust there. But I can tell you that a lot of people who have been demonetized or deplatformed, it doesn't happen because of the reasons you guys think. A lot of times, it's actually because they just weren't following the platform rules. And quite frankly, it's more likely stuff that involve community type guidelines than the hate speech stuff. And I'm being completely honest to you. And I'm not going to give you any specifics, and I'm not going to break anything like that. But vaguely like that, I think that's legit to tell you guys that. Because it should be obvious, honestly. I never thought otherwise. But that's the truth. So why want a disclaimer about the content suffice? Because that's not the issue to begin with for a lot of these platforms. To be quite honest. I mean, there's a reason flat earth stuff was just considered borderline. And by borderline, they mean, we're not going to promote it, which sounds fair. YouTube has said that you sign up, you listen to our rules, we provide you with a free platform to upload your videos and share with people publicly. They never promised to promote your work. They never promised to pay you. That's all bonus stuff. So even if you follow the rules and create stuff that they consider borderline, they're under no obligation. And I agree with this. They're under no obligation to put you in the recommended videos. I don't know how often I get into recommended videos. Probably not very often, being that this is a fairly small channel right now. But I'm not complaining about it because I know how it works. It's nothing to do with my content, I can guarantee you. Oxy, the Vox Adpocalypse will probably be like the original Adpocalypse, where their algorithm hits a broad range of content and then they pair it back up over the next 6 months. Yes, I think that's what's going to happen too. What do you know? It's Daniel says, what do you know? It's Google's giving unfair advantage to neoliberal capitalists. Google's giving unfair... You spelled it wrong, but unfair advantages to neoliberal capitalists like MSNBC. Shaking my head. If they can't extract value from its neoliberalism, we'll shut it down. Alex says, it's Zelensky tactics. Mobilize your base against the target, i.e. Carlos Vox. Bullwhip says, wasn't there doxing too? Crowder causes it, says Kennedy. Champagne says, it wasn't caused by the person complaining about the harassment. It was caused by the person doing the harassment. Kenny says, the right is pro-censorship. That's why they don't give a fuck about trans people's content being flagged as not safe for kids. Well, also, I brought up the last episode of Doomed with Matthew Billy, the host of the censorship podcast, Bleeped, where he brought up a number of real-life scenarios, not internet, real-life scenarios where conservatives use the government to try to shut down trans people events hosted by trans people. Grim says, this is the moment where I say Dimmy didn't defend J20 resistance. Kennedy says, that'll be 1 yikes and 2 oofs from me. Champagne Kami says, there's a difference between censorship and demonetization. Yes, I agree. Grim says, true, it's a privilege to be on YouTube, let alone get ad money. Right. Jay Travis says, fucking Ted Cruz. Kennedy says, always sad to see smart people get duped by right-wing anti-censorship nonsense. I think it's really just a hope of, hey, look, both sides are coming out on this issue. It feels good. For a lot of people, to be quite honest. Hey, look, the right and left agree on nothing, but here they are coming together to agree on this. I mean, and the idea that it's not some sort of like neoliberal centrist bullshit that they're coming together for or the left ceding to the right, as usually happens when they come together. I mean, I can understand why people feel good about it. I just think there's some context there that's needed. Use them for those votes. Don't get me wrong. Use them for those votes. Welcome them to get those votes you need to pass that regulation. But also understand their selfish reasons for doing so. So you can combat that too while you get their vote on the broader regulation issue. Champagne says, pro-gun is a broad term. Like, to what extent are you pro-gun? I didn't bring that up because I don't want to get any further into that analogy. I get what you're saying, and I get what he was saying. And I think you are, without a doubt, bringing up a very relevant point. But for the sake of this conversation, I didn't want to go that route because I didn't want to go too off topic. Politics Understander says, amazing that Jason Crotch is trending on Twitter. What's Jason Crotch? What am I missing out on? You're making me bring up Twitter? I don't see Jason Crotch. I missed something, didn't I? Am I going to have to search? So a guy named Jason Crouch. Who is this guy? I'm familiar with this guy. He's this right-winger on Twitter. Complained that as a result of his tweet response to Bernie Sanders yesterday about how misguided it is to push to allow federal tax dollars to pay for abortions, the Hyde Amendment, his faceless supporters now have come to my page to refer to me as Jason Crotch, as though this were an original and harmful insult. That's funny. That's funny. And I hope you can understand the difference between some making fun of someone in that sense and then harassing someone by doxing them and spewing homophobic insults that your 3 million plus fan base then goes ahead and harasses that person with too. It's two very different things. Like, if you called him like, if Crowder called him like Carlos Bozo or something like that, I'm sure there would have been no issue. Because, come on. Kennedy says, conservatives are anti-censorship until a gay person breathes in public. Misha says, I'm glad Matt is pushing back on that. Yeah, listen, I wanted him to explain why he was on the show. I had to give him something before I interrupted him. Because overall, he was completely... I just think he was trying to portray it in the sense of how it's being portrayed. He was giving the accurate assessment to if you're someone logging in and clicking Vox Adpocalypse, that's what you're seeing. So I let him say that explanation, which is a legit explanation, and then we went through and broke it down together, which I think he was very much in agreement with my assessment there. He didn't have to be. Nothing wrong with it if he wasn't. I would have actually welcomed that debate. You all know I am opining for some conservative debate. Again, not saying he was a conservative, but opining for debate in general. Elemental says, every right-wing commentator I view on YouTube wants free speech for all. Not sure who you're watching. Boy, why do they only speak out when it's something like a right-winger getting banned for harassment or targeting a Sandy Hook parent? I mean, there are plenty of cases of... Let's put it this way. If the Steve Crowder thing didn't happen, and News2Share, the channel that belongs to Ford Fischer, who was our guest, obviously, just to refresh your memory, didn't happen that same day, do you think they would have come out for him? I can guarantee you not. Because I know left-wing channels that have been banned, removed, demonetized for all sorts of various ridiculous issues, usually mass flagging from alt-right people and conservatives, actually. And no one sticks up for them on the right. It is a one-sided thing. I'm sorry. Actually says the videos taken down were just the raw speeches from the event, or was it presented in the context of a critical analysis? Well, actually, what News2Share does is they actually take raw footage of events and post it. All events. She covers a lot of Antifa rallies and all sorts of various left-wing and right-wing political events. I've watched stuff on the channel previously. I'm familiar with the channel before this happened. It's completely legit. It's legitimate, like, raw news gathering. That companies, if he was a bigger outlet, companies would pay him to license the footage for their nightly newscasts. That's what that type of stuff is. And he even says he welcomes using that material to create critical analysis in the form of YouTube commentary, which is fantastic. I think there's when I worked for Sam on the Majority Report, we were constantly pulling raw footage from channels like this. As much as we could, we would get permission, obviously. But a lot of it also, I believe, falls under fair use, being that we heavily provide analysis over it. And don't just broadcast it unedited, uncut, or in full. There's legitimate news gathering. We're just presenting an event as is, no commentary. And then there's the commentaries part of it. And there's definitely room and a necessity for both. I'm sorry if I don't say your name right. Huzaifa? I just happened to find this scrolling through YouTube. I gotta say, I found Ford at Venezuela's embassy. He's basically Tim Pool Jr. talking about extremism. He's right libertarian, basically. No, I disagree with that. And I know a lot of people who cover this stuff from the left who follows what News2Share does and disagrees with that. If you want to criticize that he doesn't have a strong opinion when doing this stuff, I think that's fair, but I also think it's fair that it's necessary that people shoot this stuff without adding commentary, to be honest. For the people who do that stuff to have the content to use. I don't think he's Tim Pool Jr. I go through his stuff. He's not defending. I mean, you heard the interview. Tim Pool would not agree with 99% of what Ford agreed with on this show. Tim Pool will be talking about how the left is foaming at the mouth, fomenting this culture war, and how Steven Crowder is a free speech warrior. That's not at all what Ford was saying. On the contrary, he completely agreed that he was being used by the right. And I also don't think there's a problem with him going forward and talking to these right-wing outlets. Tim Pool is not... Maybe Tim Pool during the Occupy days would do what Ford is doing now. Before he went full alt-right. But that's not who Tim Pool is now. Ford is definitely not that. Kennedy says there's no difference between conservatives and Nazis. I agree with that for the most part, but I do think there's a distinction if we really, on this show, we make the distinction. Because on this show, I think it's extremely important to understand all the different right-wing factions and the nuances that separates them. For example, I don't think the never-Trumpers, who in some ways they probably are Nazis, but in terms of like full-on alt-right Nazis, no, and I think there's a distinction to be made there. They're just as shitty in terms of being conservatives who want to hurt people, but there's a different level there. Huzaifa says, he's very much a weird centrist who finds outspoken people, but without class analysis, moves towards the right. I'm very wary of the guy. He is literally, I didn't even see this comment when I said that. He is literally Occupy era Tim Pool. I've got a bad feeling about this. Listen, I don't think anything where I think he spoke that I disagree with, I think I pushed back. Listen, I'm going to have all sorts of people on this show. I want conservatives on this show. But I'm not going to give them an easy time. In fact, if you don't think I'm being a dick enough, I actually, for the most part, agree that I haven't been terribly dickish enough on this show, as I would be normally, and I don't know why. I guess I'm giving people, not the benefit of the doubt because I hit them back, but I'm just happy that I respect the fact they do this show. Because a lot of people who would feel that way maybe wouldn't do this show. Like, for example, the Gun Girl. I give her credit for doing this show, even though I think she is a hypocrite for not coming back on this program. And I no longer feel that way about her, but at the time I felt, props to you for doing the show, even though I'm about to call you ignorant and say you know nothing about what you're talking about. So yeah, I could be more of a dick on this show. I want to be, and I will be. I'll concede, if that's what you want to say, that I haven't been more of an asshole. But I definitely think I've pushed back on every point, on every episode that deserved the pushback. Please, if you think I haven't, call me out. Kennedy says, this interview is oof. No, Ahmed, you're right. What? Elemental says, has nothing to do with Elizabeth Warren. Well, definitely did. Mr. K, I remember when Google took over and destroyed Deja News. They have never created threaded news groups again, and it killed news groups. Napster has never been replaced by iTunes in the same way. Dank says Ted Cruz just hates big tech because he accidentally retweeted incest porn. Ian says Cruz is becoming progressive. AOC, Warren, the beard. Jay Dreba says break up big tech for sure, but for real. Mr. K says I think if a company gets so big that it owns an entire sector, it should automatically become a state-owned utility, maybe a golden parachute for the inventors, and that's it. Dinah says, I haven't given a lot of thought, but at first blush, a video sharing site like YouTube strikes me as a natural monopoly. Ought to not be for profit venture, in my opinion. Jesse says, isn't Cruz anti-net neutrality? I find it hard to believe he cares about breaking up these companies in a serious way. Right. But he brings it, but when he hears about how these companies are censoring conservatives, then he's all for it all of a sudden. Right. Absolutely. Great point. Grim says the biases in facial recognition have been public knowledge for years. Oxy says, at Zuccotti Park during Occupy Wall Street, the NYPD set up a facial recognition camera so they could arrest people with outstanding warrants. Oxy says, Rogan also said, what's the difference between Crowder calling Carlos a F-word and Sam Cedar mocking Dave Rubin, calling him wrong, stupid? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Brian says, I don't know, the rightists will play the victim anyway. Crowder would have just been emboldened if nothing happened. Renee says, a nativist dog whistles against Hispanics, right? Jesse says, YouTube did nothing until they were called out publicly, at which point they were damned no matter what. Renee says, fascists disguise themselves as revolutionaries. It's the old con. Brian, Crowder is like one of those, is on half those PragerU ads that plague the site, and somehow he's the little guy, right? Dang says, throwback Thursday to when Matt Binder was filming the Majority Report. Renee says, I'm a left-wing institute that got invaded by fascists. Renee is talking about how Che used to heal his enemies as a doctor and was trying to free Bolivia, which inspired Mas Evo Morales. Check out the Bider Meinhof Polymorphs Action Group. All right. Renee says, you heard about the Uruguayan lesbian that got attacked in London along with her partner? I have not. Renee continues, and I reported Milo to the FBI on Twitter due to his manifesto tweet communique calling for violence against journalists. Dang says, unrelated to anything, Ford Fischer has nice teeth and brows too, says Kennedy. Well, I'm sure Ford would have enjoyed to hear that. I hope, if he's still listening, Ford. Dog on the Roof says, the Nazi pug guy, Mark Meacham, a.k.a. Count Dankula, is a Scottish white nationalist and was bragging about tagging immigrant folks in Twitter arguments to ICE on Twitter. Right, that guy's a fascist. That guy's a white supremacist. Dog on the Roof says, and we know how much ICE cares about whether or not someone is legal. Grim says, deport Melania. Kennedy says, sorry to be such a negative Nancy in the comments. It's hard. Listen, I want you... Listen, on this show, there'll be no complaints about negativity, critique, bashing me. Bring it. Bring it. Oxy says, did you get the light from B&H? No, I got it from Amazon. I know, but... Kennedy says, debate me, but only if you're a 19-year-old college student during finals week. Right, that's what they want, right? That's the debates they want. Renee says, you should invite Carlos on before too much blood clot show nabs him. I don't know what show you're talking about, but I actually did invite Carlos on the show. And I'm assuming he's a bit busy right now. And rightfully so. I did not expect. It was a shot in the dark. Hopefully he comes on. I'll welcome him when all this dies down. If he prefers that, I have no problem with that. I'm sure he's very busy right now. I'm under no belief that he needs to come on the show, otherwise he's censoring or running from me. Politics Understander. Is tomorrow Binder Friday and MR? Not yet. You guys should contact Sam and say, come on, when's it happening? Ryan says, Matt, how many patrons do you need before you can build a backdrop a la the Majority Report? Like, literally exactly like the Majority Report. Listen, we've sort of been struggling Patreon-wise. it's my fault for sure a lot. I am a really bad self-promoter when it comes to this show. And it's nothing to do about the love of the show. I just, it's been difficult with all the things going on. And I'm notoriously, I've told you guys how I have always had a thing about self-promotion. I would love to do this show like full time. Let me tell you this right now. If I was making the Michael Brooks show money on Patreon, if I had, what does he have, like 2,000 patrons, this show would be a daily show. I guarantee you right now. It'd be a daily show. There'd be regular content being pushed out, clips. There'd be tons of stuff. Michael Brooks is not giving you guys enough stuff. I'll tell you that. If this show had 2,000 patrons, and I'm telling you right, maybe I should make that a goal, even though we're about 1,950 patrons away from that. At 2,000 patrons, this would be a full-time show. Not only would I do a daily show, but if breaking news happened, I would jump on and do a breaking news report. You guys would get so much content from me. I would probably do that newsletter I've been telling you guys about that I just simply have not found the time to do, even though I really want to do it. I'd probably start a site and pay people like writers, freelancers, reporters, journalists to do at least one new piece of content a day on something no one else is talking about. I don't get some of these. A lot of these patrons Patreon, big Patreons, totally deserve it. I'm not bashing anyone for how much they get. I'm saying that if I was in their shoes, I would be giving you guys so much more content. I guess because I feel like I would be obligated to. Maybe that's why I'm not making that much. I don't have that many patrons. I'm the sucker, that's why. I'm not blessed anyone. The Michael Brooks show is a great show. Michael Brooks is a great... I know I'm defeating my show feud, my wrestling kayfabe feud that I have with Michael that I enjoy having on air. But Michael is an extremely talented host. His show is great. Little pet peeve that he doesn't have me on more often. I mean, some people are going on once a month? I mean, I don't know what's going on over there. Sam has invited me on Friday, but no follow-up. So that's where I'm at. Grim says, just buy a flat panel and have red and black flags waving as a screensaver. Let me tell you, if I had more patrons, there'd be like a professional website. The domain wouldn't be doomedpod.com. I would find Doomed and buy that. I would brand the show heavily. There would be merch that I would probably give out for free to patrons. Probably not at the $5 level, but there'd be a tier where you'd get that. Like I said, more content, regular shows. I don't know, again, why I'm promoting this in the members half. Talking to the choir here, but I'm telling you guys, so maybe you'll stay members, stay patrons. Maybe convince your friends, your fellow leftist best compadres to check out the show at the very least. Kennedy says, Glenn Greenwald is a shithead recently. Politics understander. Yikes. Matt doesn't know what's been going on with Glenn since he started the show. I know what's going on with Glenn Greenwald, and I think it's silliness. I don't know why he's focusing on this whole culture wars, internet drama stuff. It's dumb, and I hate that people focus on that. But he hasn't gone that route he hasn't gone full Tim Pool. He hasn't gone Cassandra Fairbanks. The idea that, oh yeah, I was a leftist. I did believe in this stuff, and then the left wanted people to stop hating on transgender people, or the left wanted YouTube to enforce its policies against people calling for the extermination of gay people or Jewish people. And then I said, no, I can't be a part of that. I'm now a classical liberal, but agree with everything the right says. He's not one of those. I'm sorry. Whatever this tangent he's going on now, it's sad and ridiculous. I disagree with him on that, but he is not that. He is a solid reporter, a solid journalist. I respect the work he's done and continues to do immensely. I'm sorry. But I also agree with you guys that he has gone in a direction on that specific issue that is unfortunate. But I listen, just look at his work in The Intercept. Just look what The Intercept's putting out. It's good stuff, and it's clearly on the left. He's not one of those guys. I'm sorry. Back to the comments. Renee says, Pee-wee works against Bolsonaro. Oh, is that what we're calling Glenn Grell now? Pee-wee? Pee-wee Herman? Nah, I don't think he looks like Pee-wee Herman. Yeah, but see, exactly. He's on our side on so many issues. I can't. He's not those people. He is not. He's been taken off track, and that's his fault. And criticize him rightly and justly for that by this whole culture war nonsense. But he hasn't turned his back on everything else because of it, like the others have. Grim says, no shit, the Fash break the terms of service. Renee says, the shift is in paradigm with memes and agitprop versus fact. Dog on the Roof says, conservatives constantly whine censorship because for years they were editing Anne Frank being gay or the end of Harrison Bergeson out of books and feel like only they get to do it. I like that. They do not have a problem with a curated narrative. They're just mad that they don't get to control it. They're not mad someone is banned from YouTube. They made no noise when LGBT videos were marked not friendly for kids. They're mad their propaganda is getting flagged too. Oh, that guy, Jason Crouch. Dank's laughing at his Twitter bio. Christian, husband, father of 4, homeschooler, Austin, Texas, broker, realtor, writer, Dallas Cowboys fan. Renee says, Richard Spencer admitted it. It's just a distraction, but then of course once in power, they'll go after opponents. Dog on the Roof. Richard Spencer admits it, but the conservatives pursue it. A woman had to go to court for laughing at Jeff Sessions. Yes, great point. Renee says, Kyle Clancy's point, everyone should be allowed or it sets a precedent. I don't know if I agree with that. But I get that concern. Politics Understander. Wow, Greenwald was on Tucker tonight. Called Crowder marginalized and Carlos Maza powerful. Well, then that is flat out wrong. I mean, I don't have a problem with Greenwald going on Fox. I don't have a problem with him talking to Tucker. So let's get that out of the way. I'm disappointed that he goes on that show and doesn't push back on stuff. I don't have a problem with him outright going on the show, though. Crowder is not marginalized, and Carlos is not powerful. Crowder is immensely powerful on YouTube. I mean, Carlos isn't not powerful. But describing one as powerful and the other one as not is not true. I would say, if anything, you want to compare, I could make the case that they're both on pretty equal footing. Michael says, I'd be all in favor of getting rid of YouTube ad money altogether and insisting that Google pay content creators, maybe through YouTube Premium. Spotify Premium is ad-free because it's paid. Yeah, but how do you think they pay in Spotify? How do you think the artists get paid? The same way they get paid on YouTube. And you actually do get a bit more from the people who are YouTube Premium subscribers who watch your content. So, and then what determines who gets paid by YouTube and how much? I think the system works, and I always have a sort of soft spot for YouTube for being the one major content platform that pays the creators. I respect that, truly. I really do. Facebook and Twitter and all these other platforms take our content and get money and get rich off it for free. I mean, I know YouTube is doing some advertising stuff now, but content revenue sharing stuff now with their advertising, but it's very little, and it's only a very small select group. I respect YouTube for doing that. I wouldn't throw, what is the saying? Throw the baby out with the bathwater? No, they have to get their act together policy-wise. But the monetization platform is smart. It's very smart. I think they should, obviously, I think they should be paying creators more. They don't get paid enough. But I don't think they would get paid more if YouTube just paid them outright. In fact, they'd probably get paid less. I mean, I'm not getting rich off YouTube. And I still respect it that they do that. They pay creators. And I think a revenue share model in this aspect works. Listen, do you think... Obviously, I wish, back in how it worked, you acted in a movie, a show, or whatever, you got paid by a production company or whatever. Listen, I get that if you're looking at it like that. But do you think YouTube, if there was no monetization sharing program, do you think YouTube would hire political commentators at all? I would say no. So that means there would be little to no revenue to be made from YouTube for leftist commentators. Truthfully, I think YouTube wishes they could just throw the politics shit out altogether. I think the politics commentary stuff is more trouble to them than it's worth. I really do think that. Because compared to their other niches, the beauty bloggers who, they're the big feuds and dramas online, but none of it gets them the press coverage until this recent one that happened, that big one. But this has been going on forever. And the beauty stuff, the gaming stuff, all that's their bread and butter. That's what's making them the money. The politics stuff is probably more trouble to them than it's worth, to be quite honest with you. So that's why I'm not saying they shouldn't do politics. I'm just saying that's why I worry that a YouTube funded straight up no monetization policy would be the opposite of beneficial to us. Dog on the Roof says Greenwald likes money like Michael Tracy. They know you get dollars for shilling the right wing. I don't know about that. If Matt rebranded as a pro-Modi, pro-Bolsonaro libertarian tomorrow, he'd get more cash. Well then, if you put it that way, then folks, Modi is good, Bolsonaro is good, there's black helicopters flying over me, I'm being watched, I'm being censored by the left, I want to be able to call women the C word and harass them. I want to be able to say the N word without any blowback, any consequence. I want to harass the LGBT community. There we go. That's it. Send your money to patreon.com/MattBinder. I have made the official switch to the right. No, but yeah, I know what you're saying. I've said that on this show too. I just don't know if that's what Greenwald is doing. Renee says Pee-wee works in Brazil and Intercept does great work. Dog on the Roof says Tim Pool got sent to Sweden to report on no-go zones. Got there, said there was no no-go zones. Got home and then said, hey, Sweden has no-go zones. Right. That's who Tim Pool is. Kennedy says, we know you want to have right-wingers on, but we want to be mean to them in the chat. And by all means, please do so. Champagne Kami says, Gun Girl only needed the clout back then. Right. Well, I wager that if I had a larger subscriber base and a bigger platform, she would come back on the show. So get to it, guys. Renee says, you need to get Michael on to dunk on people. I'll be honest. I think Michael is very smart. But I think he does that too much when talking to conservatives. I think his Sargon debate went really well for him. I thought he was great. But I do think he interrupted Sargon too much, which plays into their hands. And they're able to use that. You do have to let them just talk. You have to, it's like reeling them in. Let them talk. Let them say what they want to say. And then you take it as a whole. A lot of times they trip themselves up, which helps you out as well, obviously. That's why I don't interrupt a lot of times. Reel them in. Dang says, I don't know. It would have ruined the interview if he just got into a debate with the guy about his libertarian views. And honestly, he agreed with me on everything, it seems, from what I can remember, on this specific issue. YouTube, demonetization, deplatforming, Vox, Adpocalypse. He literally seemed to have agreed with me on every single point. So what am I going to debate him on? TMBS is too much blood clot show. What does that mean? Dank says, you need to get a majority report to promote it. Ryan says, hell yeah, call Brooksy out. Dank, rest in peace, Michael's work ethic. Ryan says, Brooksy and his scamming Baker Buckets challenge. Brian says, man, fuck Cliff Schechter. Matty B should be the new Friday regular. Grim says, Doomed and the Antifada are more worthwhile Patreons. Dog on the Roof says, okay, so my Michael Brooks tea is I like him, but his tons of his anti-right-wing censorship stuff is almost exclusively him being worried about not being able to do offensive accents anymore. I mean, I don't say it that way, but that is a worry of me in terms of I enjoy having this content out there because it gives me content. But I do, I keep using this word nuance, and I've used it a lot in a lot of interviews these past few episodes. But I think it's the most perfect word to use. I don't care these right-wingers I don't care that these specific right-wingers are being deplatformed because they deserve it. These are their consequences. I worry about the power these companies have to be able to deplatform people like this. I worry that this slippery slope we saw with News2Share being demonetized and getting swept up in something because he covered an event where people were saying this stuff as opposed to saying this stuff himself or promoting the stuff that was being said. That's the stuff I worry about. At the same time, I'm not going to die on the hill of Alex Jones needs to be on YouTube. What happened to Alex Jones is horrible. Nah, he probably not going to. I'm not going to lose any sleep tonight when Alex Jones gets banned. So that's my. Renee says you should be on stage on Michael's live show. Michael has not invited me to do the live show. That's just the straight up. That's the tea. Maybe that's another thing you guys could get on top of. Tell Michael, why isn't Matt booked on a live show? Seems weird, but hasn't been invited on a live show. Dang says Binder running for left is best Patreon president. I'm telling you, man. All these Patreons aren't giving you enough. I'm being serious. The amount of money some of these guys are making, well deserved. Not saying don't be their Patreon. They deserve it. I'm fans of every single one of them. But I'd give you guys a lot more content. I guarantee it. I'm not giving you guys more content now because I don't have enough Patreon subscribers to make sense of it. If I was in my early 20s that had no kids, I would just go ahead with it and hope that grew the channel. But unfortunately, I can't afford to do that right now. It's, in many ways, the word afford meaning time, money, not just money. Dog on the Roof says every Michael Brooks segment on I Too Worry About the Left is about how he's worried his Steven Crowder, Peter Thiel impression will hit his expiry date. Renee says Pee Wee Herman works better in Brazil though. He so looks like Paul Rubens, especially when he narrows his eyes to offer an opinion. Dog says, do folks call in still for the end half, or is it new? I was talking about my show. I got to figure out something, because what usually happens is the main show ends, and I'm honestly feeling a little bit tired. An hour is alone, with no breaks, is rough, to be quite honest with you. I enjoy doing these chats in the commentary, in the Twitter live stream stuff. That's not as difficult. But I stopped taking calls because I think it would be too much. It would go for too long. Maybe, and I think I mentioned this on the last show, what I should do is do the interview. End it when it ends. 45 minutes to an hour 10 minutes. That seems to be the time frame of the show, the main show. And then the next day or later in the week or on the weekend, we get together and just do this stuff for Patreon subscribers. And we could do the calls. We could probably do a little bit longer because there isn't a whole hour show before this. Let's consider this. And tell me if you guys would prefer it. Kennedy says, I have close to 11,000 followers on Tumblr and nothing to show for it except memes. Let me tell you, Kennedy, I got tens of thousands of, maybe even more than that, of Tumblr followers on that public shaming Tumblr. And I dropped the ball on it. Truly. Renee says, try to be a mod on Novara Media. What are you talking about, Renee? Dang says, I think it's pretty messed up to compare Greenwald to Tracy. I agree. He's not the same. Tracy has about 1/100th the talent, period, says Dang. Yes. Kenny says, I watch Novara to learn not to comment. What are you guys talking about? Dang says, now if you're calling Tracy a yard sale Greenwald imitator. Ryan says, letting right-wingers talk equals giving them enough rope to hang themselves. Dog on the Roof says, Matt out here with the big brain takes on how to interview, but for real. Dang says, yeah, I didn't notice too much to debate on either. Renee says, blood clot is Jamaican slang for bullshit or nonsense. Huh. Jamal trying to be Caribbean. I'm not. Dang says, Michael does talk over a lot of callers after 10 seconds, to be honest, which I actually think is fine. Dang says, because Sam will give some dumbasses 10 minutes. Well, there's clearly a middle ground there. Dog on the Roof says, Matt is right. Well, thank you. Renee says, oh yeah, like Matt going tanky for Game of Thrones. Oh, and Renee's going to plug me to be on the live show. Thank you. And Dog on the Roof likes the idea of separating the main show from this show so we could do more time and do calls. All right, folks. That is our show for today. Thank you so much for all your support. Hope you had a good time. Hope you liked the show. Continue to promote and plug the show wherever possible. I really appreciate it. And I'm serious about, when I grow the show, as I grow the show, there will be more. I'm not someone who's going to see the money roll in and think I got to do less and just kick back. All right, guys. Politics Understander with the final comment of the night. I hope Matt does call so I can ask him about obscure wrestling matches. Absolutely. That sounds like a great idea. Have a good night. See you all next time on Doom.